Hi guys, Sylph here. So I just wanted to share some of the progress I've made with the designer. So today I'm going to walk you through expanding a contract type onto a new map. We're going to start with doing this with the solo duel, and I'll show you the process that anyone using the designer would go through. So the designer is a mod, like every other thing. Once you've got it installed, it creates an entry point here. So you'd enter that. Using a pre-configured location, the designer will scan for any contract types. So this could be the mission control folder, but more likely a working directory that you've set up yourself, maybe with your own contract types in there, and copies of these ones for reference if you need to. So you're presented with the contract types area. If you select any of these, you get to see the encounter layers. So the encounter layer is effectively a combination of a map and a contract type, and it's got its own unique identifier, so you could still have multiple instances of Solo Duel on the same map, and each one of those would show up as an encounter layer. At the moment I only have one encounter layer per map right now. Doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment for the duels, the ones I've done at the moment, to be spread out on the same map, but you could do. Okay, so before we create an encounter layer, we're going to need a suitable map to put our duel on. So the designer actually has a map viewer, and if you select it, you get presented with all the maps you have access to. So this would be if you've bought the DLCs, you also get, the urban and jungle maps too. If you select these maps, you're presented with a kind of a preview of the map. Now this is great to give the designer a quick feeling for the map, and then they can decide to look deeper into it. So if they're going through and we're going to look for one for a duel, so I've already decided I want this top one, Big Loch. This looks great from at least from this overview, because it's got a lake with some islands, and I'm thinking if we limit the boundary to this middle section here, this could be a pretty good duel. It's got some water, it's got some trees, well, it looks like trees, we'll find out in a minute. But yeah, let's do that. So you can click to load into the map, and let's have a better look at it. So here we are, this is loaded in. When you're in the map viewer mode, you don't have any user interface cluttering up the way, and it allows you to have a really good look at the map to see if it's suitable for your idea, for your contract type. So we can see here, it's looking pretty good. It's got a big section here. I'm really thinking we outline the boundary here. So off the top of my head, top right could be for one of the spawn points of the mech jeweler, and bottom left island here, and naturally it allows them to fight in the middle, and there's some mountains here so they don't get line of sight of each other. So looks good. Let's take this. So if I press escape, I come back here, and we're going to copy the map name, map ID, into that clipboard. We're going to use this in a minute. So there's a copy to clipboard button here by the map. We'll go back to the contract types, Solo Duel. We'll create a new encounter layer, and we're going to paste the map name in the map ID section there. You can see there are some elements here that you can't edit. They're auto-generated or they're inferred. So we've got the map ID in there. We'll just save. Actually, we're going to name this. The current convention for naming I'm using right now is map name. So Big Loch _ and then we call it biome. So it's Highlands Spring, and some unique identifiers. So I'm going to call it kind of arena for now. I'm going to save this here, and I'm going to just copy and paste some information from the other encounters. The name and friendly name doesn't really get seen by players, so I'm going to call it Solo Duel Lake, and copy the description across as well. So Big Loch, Highland Spring Arena. Yep, so this all looks good. I'm going to save this again. And then we're going to go in and start setting things up for it. If I load the encounter, because this is it's a point to make, because this is not the first time I've set up an encounter layer for Solo Duel. All the logic is already in place, so you can see it pop in on the left. If you were creating your first ever one, you'd have nothing here, and you right click, create new chunk, and you would build it that way. But since we're just adding it to another map, we're just going to move things around basically. So it's loaded in with some default information here for the encounter boundary, because we don't actually have any information yet for it, and anything with positions gets dumped in the center position, and then we need to move it around. So this is the map we looked at earlier. It's given it a pretty good size boundary, but I think it'd be nice to reduce this a bit more. I want to limit it just to the kind of lake area here. Position's okay, but I want a bit more of the top island there, because that's going to be a spawn area. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good here for a boundary. You can just click and drag it. And now we're going to move the player spawns. Before I do that, I'm just going to give a quick summary. So you can see on the left here, you've got the nodes, chunks, and then underneath that, the nodes for the logic for Solo Duel. So you have the 2 spawn points and an objective for destroying the jeweler. You have some of the taunt dialogue that gets triggered in the game when you first make contact. You have a swap spawner, a piece of logic which will randomly swap the 2 spawns. So if you've ever played the Solo Duel, sometimes you start in one of the spawn points and sometimes you start in the other, so it swaps the placement around. And there's a pilot death logic there, which is optional. The contracts themselves can turn this on or off. And so if a contract is, for instance, you're in a simulator or you're giving training to someone, then you could say, well, it doesn't make sense for your pilot to die if they lose the duel. So you can actually disable pilot death. You can actually disable injuries as well, but for the Solo Duel, yeah, you still can get injured. And then there's some dialogue and then the encounter boundary. So, okay, going back to our player spawns. So if I click on it up here and press F, it'll zoom me to it, and I can actually move it around. Like I said, they're all stacked on each other at the moment. You can actually press escape and then click them again, and you can actually interact with them that way. So I'm gonna move the player spawner. I think I'm gonna move him over here. I think down here looks pretty good, or yeah, there. And I think I'm gonna move the other spawner over to the island here. There. Okay. So if I go back actually to that enemy spawner and press F, it takes me there again. Let's just check the line of sights. Yeah. You can't see the other one. But I don't really want this guy facing that way, so I click M. You have tools up there. If anyone's used any 3D tool programs before, you've got I've added these kind of gizmos in here. So it's positional and rotation. So if I just rotate this guy to face, it's roughly right, the direction of the other spawn point, and if I click and press F, and I'm going to change him to look. Where's the other one? He's over there, okay. So make him look in that direction too. Okay, that's pretty good there. So that's the boundary done, and the positions of the 2 lancers, the player and the enemy. So yeah, this looks pretty good. We've got our boundaries, we've moved our spawn points. Yeah, and there's a good fighting area there. So I think we'll call that done. So if I save this, it will save the files. And let's go have a look at this in the game. Okay, so we've loaded the game up. It's using a slightly different mod folder. So you can't use the designer with the game normally. The reason being is the designer overrides loads of map related, encounter related things that would just break a normal game. So when working with designer, you have your designer folder, which is basically the designer, mission control, that's probably about it. And then you have your normal mods folder for whatever works for you. So this is then the game mode. I'm going to load into just any old career. And I'm going to inject the contract in. So if I'm in debug mode here, I'm going to select Solo Duel, and you can see now it says the arena big lock, that's the map name, and you can see the encounter layer that we created, the Solo Duel Lake, that's already there for us. Let's just pick Proxy War and inject that in there. If we look for it, you can actually see that's the contract. We're going to go in and have a look at our map. So it's something to mention is that now with version 1.5 of Mission Control, if you launch into a custom contract type, it will give you the contract type name, the author who created it. If there's any contributors associated with it, they will show up there too. If there's not, it won't show up. And it will tell you it was created with the designer. Okay, so the map's loaded. We're going to go into it. So you can see here now we're actually, the swap spawner didn't want to run for this particular one, so we're actually where we placed the player spawn. Dialogue's running. As you can see, the boundaries are where they should be. You can see the lines there, which is looking excellent. You can see the enemies over here. Yeah, we can go fight then. But just do a quick run in. Now, current version of Solo Duel, and it's been this way for a long time, is that the enemy will just stay sitting there until they detect you. A change I'll be making with 1.5, which I already have working, just not for this version, is that the enemy will run to engage you to begin with. So you'd have this nice situation where the enemy would have reached this island, or would soon be reaching it by the time you get here, and you can fight on the island. Because right now, that enemy mech is literally just sitting there until you make contact. There you go. Dialogue's playing. But in 1.5, that mech will run over and try to get to you before, like a good duel. Okay, well, there we go, guys. We've just seen that's how you use the designer to pretty quickly expand a contract type onto another map. So one last thing, if anyone wants to support the development of the designer, I do have a Patreon page, so visit that and check it out. So thanks a lot, take care, bye bye.